Hello, everyone. You're listening to Those Are the Girls with Mallory and Friends. I'm Mallory.
I'm Victoria.
And I'm Abby.
And we are changing culture and bringing back traditional values. Okay, you guys, we have another true crime-ish episode for you today. We are actually going to be talking about the NXIVM Cult. I really wanted to do this episode because I saw, like, on the plane ride from somewhere I was going, I started watching the documentary and I was like, whoa, like some of the things she was saying, I was like, wow, this is something that really, truly does like affect women. Like, just when we get into it, I'll like explain what I mean by that. But I was like, this is something that I think we should address. This is something that I think will be a really good topic. It's something that was like popular. And also too, more than anything, it was something that I felt any one of us could have fallen for. And before you stop listening, you're like, oh, okay, ha ha ha. Before you do that, like, just listen to us talk about what happened. It's definitely something that it's definitely how it transpired is something I can see any woman that I know, any career woman, I'll even put it that way, any career woman that I know falling into. So yes.
I will say too, watching these documentaries and like hearing these women tell their stories, I felt like I related to every single one of them. Like I felt like those are girls that I could have known or that I could have been friends with, and that easily could have been me, you know?
Yeah. Oh, same. Like, especially the main girl that we'll get into, she seems like I probably would have run into her in college. Mm-hmm. All right. So first thing is, for those that don't know, we'll just talk about NXIVM really quick, and then we'll go over the definition of a cult, and then like as Christians, you know, we'll go along those lines. But so NXIVM was a cult that became really popular, or like we became aware, the average person, because that's another thing that we can talk about. The average person became aware of this cult back in 2018, I believe, is when it went like mainstream in the sense of they arrested Allison Mack. And that's how I got interested in it. I don't know if anybody else here watches Smallville. Great show. That's like on the list of the things that me and my dad watch. It's about Superman as a kid, as a teenager. And the main character, the guy who plays Superman, is so attractive. And my dad and I always like joke about how is he supposed to be, because Superman's supposed to be like this awkward, nerdy farm boy, and it's like Clark, no.
Why is everyone on this show so attractive?
right. Yeah. And I'm sorry.
Well, clearly you have not watched Superman and Lois, because the guy who plays Superman in that show is, oh my God. Tyler Hoechlin or something. He was in Teen Wolf.
Oh.
The beautiful man.
Okay. You keep mentioning that. I'm going to have to watch it.
You need to watch it. It's so good.
I'm gonna have to watch it. Everything that you suggest, I always watch it like 6 months after you suggest it. I do the same thing with everyone else in my life. I don't know why, but yeah. So she played Chloe, who was kind of like, Lana was the main female character, and then Chloe was kind of her sidekick, which is very interesting because that's essentially what happens in the cult. She's basically the sidekick, and I just find that very interesting. And it became famous because she was arrested, and it was they talked about also too, the other thing that made it famous was there was a lot of quote unquote sex involved. So, you know, the saying sex sells, and that's unfortunately kind of how it is. Like anytime you mention anything sexual, everyone's like, ooh, what's that? Ooh, let's see. So then that's pretty much what happened. And then people just started coming out of the woodwork talking about their experiences, and now there's like podcasts about it. There was a trial. Allison Mack and Keith Laniere, and I believe the other lady, they all got long jail sentences. They are going to be away for a long time. But yeah, so I'm going to stop rambling after I say this other thing. So I want to talk about really what exactly is a cult. And I looked up a definition before we logged on, and a cult is a system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object. It's a relatively small group of people having religious beliefs or practices regarded by others as strange or sinister. So what I really kind of just wanted to bring up that definition, because, you know, you listening could possibly maybe be in a cult.
not.
if what'd you say?
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. But I just think that's just something to think about, because when we think of a cult, we think of kind of like, I mean, it says sinister, which I kind of don't like that, because when I think of sinister, I'm thinking of like that evil guy from that Christmas special, the one that didn't want Frosty to be there. I think of that guy with his eye and then like the little, but that's not necessarily what it is. But strange, I think, is important to think about. And so how do we define strange, I think, is also important. Before we get this started, for those that are listening, this is a Christian conservative podcast. So our worldview that we are speaking on this is from a Christian perspective. Hopefully you listening are a Christian. If not, I want you to understand that that's the lens that we are speaking from. So our worldview, everybody has a worldview. I say this every time I bring up us being Christian. Everybody has a worldview. Ours is Christian. So what we find strange is things that will be outside of God's design. How do we know God's design? The Bible. So one of the things that Cultish is a very good podcast that talks about cults. Everyone should listen to it. One of the things they always talk about is when people leave cults, it's kind of, a lot of times they're kind of like, ooh, what do I do? What do I do? Because sometimes they don't turn to Christianity, and Christianity is the only objective truth that you have that can determine whether, you know what, this person treating you this way is wrong. The reality is, if you just think any and everything goes, why is Allison Mack, I'll just use an example, why is Allison Mack telling you can only eat 900 calories a day? Why is that wrong? And then spanking you or hitting you if you don't. Why is that wrong if you don't have an objective truth? So that is just like the framework that we're going to go through this. And then the last thing I want to say before we get into it, sorry, everybody, this is a long intro, but the last thing I want to say is there were two themes that I personally saw when I was listening to all the interviews and everything. There were two things that I heard. People were feeling empty and wanting something more. And I think that's something that we can all have at times related to, which is why I want everyone to realize, like, this is something that is definitely, it's something that is, I mean, like Abby said, it's something that can happen to any one of us, any of our friends, because we all go through that. And these type of leaders, these type of people prey on that. All right, that's the intro. Let's get into the NXIVM Cult. Abby, do you want to start us off?
I can start us off. Okay, so Mallory touched on it, but NXIVM was founded in 1998. So it's been around for a long time. It's like kind of crazy to think about because it didn't really come to the forefront of the media until like 20 years later.
Yeah.
So it's something that this man named Keith Raniere started with another woman, Nancy Salzman. Basically, it was marketed as a personal development company, what they called executive success programs, which they refer to as ESP. So if we say ESP, that's what we mean. So
okay, so
these
pause
ESP classes were
pause for 2 seconds.
Taught and led. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So I want you to just talk about really quick how it did start off as a personal development, because I think that is something that as women, I feel personal development, especially nowadays, is targeted for us. Something that we're all kind of into. Like, I know I've looked into like the self-development, like, okay, how can I be a better person? How can I do that? So that's where I want to kind of like get everyone to think this is kind of how it started off, because cults don't start off with being branded. That's not, I mean, no one goes, all right, let me go get branded. It starts off something smaller, and then it gets bigger and then bigger and bigger. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, so I mean, I totally agree with what you just said. It's definitely something they use to draw people in. Like, do you want to better yourself? Do you want to improve yourself? Like, yes, of course, we all want that for ourselves.
Right.
So I think that's kind of how they got people on the hook. And then it sort of was this progression. They got these people in, they gained their trust, and then they used that trust to teach them in a way that like stripped them of their ability to think critically. And that's how they ended up where they ended up.
Exactly.
Yeah, so they had these ESP classes that were led by Keith and Nancy, the founders of NXIVM. And during these classes, Keith Raniere was to be referred to as Vanguard, and Nancy Salzman was to be referred to as Prefect.
Weird.
Yeah, like if this is not a red flag that this is strange, I mean, maybe not a red flag that it's a cult, but that it's at least weird. Like,
yeah.
And a lot of people in the interviews did say they found it weird. They were like, I don't want to call him that, like, but they just went along with it anyways. And yeah, so I guess
and also sorry to pause.
No, you're good.
Stop you really quick. This is also a good point where it's like, you know what? If you feel as if something's off, maybe that's the Holy Spirit. Maybe the Holy Spirit is telling you, hey, calling this random guy a Vanguard is that's a little strange. That's the Holy Spirit's like ding ding ding.
Yeah. If it feels weird, it is weird.
Yeah.
So Keith Raniere got this name Vanguard from some video game. And the video game is described as one in which the destruction of one's enemies increases one's own power. So it's like, did he do that on purpose? Maybe, maybe not. Like hindsight's 2020, but still, again, weird.
That sounds like it's this book that a lot of guys have read, The 48 Laws of Power. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't. Sounds interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's interesting, but that's just what that reminded me of.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue.
Okay. All right. So this NXIVM, these ESP classes got really popular, and by 2003, 3,700 people had taken part in these classes, and these classes were expensive. They were upwards of like $7,500 for these like seminar sets that they would do. So it was very like high class, like wealthy people taking these classes. It was like high level business people, surgeons, Enron executives, the daughter of the former Mexican president, like, and then two actresses who were in Battlestar Galactica, Grace Park and Nikki Klein, and then Claire and Sarah Bronfman, who are the heiresses to the Seagram's liquor fortune. They were like huge prominent members, and I think one or both of them got sentenced at the end of this.
Yeah, I think one of them did. I think one of them
I want to say it was Sarah.
Yeah.
I could be wrong on that though.
Yeah, I think so too. And I just also want to point out, so two things, like when I hear and heard about the amount of money, I was like, okay, well, yeah, I definitely would not have been able to participate, but I definitely know that I would have wanted to. But it also kind of shows that, like, especially because, like you said, there were surgeons, there was someone who is an heiress to Seagram's. I mean, we all know Seagram's. So it's not just stupid people, because I think that's another misconception. People think it's like, oh, these like really dumb people that don't know anything. But no, anyone can fall into that. That's another reason why I think this is so interesting and it's something to talk about. Anyone can fall into it. I will say, you know, the financial aspect definitely puts a barrier up for many, but also too, I mean, if you want to find money for something, you can. That's something I've learned. Yeah, like
the cost of it kind of makes it seem like this like exclusive, desirable thing that people want to be a part of, and like there's all these like high society people attending these classes that are like hold promise of self-improvement and happiness and all that kind of stuff. So I think that was very intentional, making like marketing and branding these classes as something for rich high society people.
Yes, it gives very much Sea Org Scientology vibes.
Oh yeah, I definitely drew a lot of parallels when I was going through this stuff to Scientology. It seems very similar.
Yeah.
So basically, like these classes, again, they were like self-improvement classes. And did you watch The Vow?
I did not see that one.
Okay.
I saw Seduction.
Gotcha. Okay, so I watched The Vow on HBO Max. Excellent documentary. It's pretty long. It's 9 episodes, but they do like a deep dive into all this stuff. They interview all sorts of people. It was fascinating. But one of the things that I noticed was people said that when they first started taking these classes, they like almost everyone said they thought it was totally bizarre and that they were like, I can't believe I wasted all this money on this. Like, what's going on? But that someone else was telling them, just wait it out. Just wait it out. Like the 3rd class, the 4th class, people have a breakthrough, you know? So
yeah.
Like, all right, well, I guess I'll keep going. And then like clockwork, they just like got hooked
Yeah.
So it's like, you gotta wonder, what is it that they were selling them that all of a sudden they just like have this shift? And another thing too is everyone was saying that Keith Raniere was like super charming, super personable, made them feel special, like they belonged there, like, which I think is very typical of a cult leader.
Absolutely. And I think this could be a good time to talk about Keith a little bit. I listened to I forgot the name of the podcast. I think it was Into NXIVM podcast. I'll link it somewhere, or I'll have our resources somewhere. And they talked a little bit about Keith and his past. So apparently he put himself off as this really smart guy that I think he's in the world's Guinness Australia's record book for some sort of IQ award. Well, this guy graduated
extremely high IQ.
Yeah.
He wanted to be a renowned, like, smart guy, basically, like a Steve Jobs or
that was his goal.
Right.
And he graduated college with a 2.6, which I'm not knocking that. But when you're saying you're this genius, it's kind of like, I feel like you should have a little bit higher than a 2.6 if you're going to say you're this genius. But another thing that I heard in multiple podcasts that were like giving the background of Keith that I found very interesting is, so his parents divorced, and he was living with his mother at one point, and his mom would overhear him talking to girls, and he was in high school and he was very manipulative to these girls, even in high school. So I just find that interesting that like he kind of showed this manipulation, this I don't even know the right word for it, this behavior as a youth. And they also were saying that like he, even when he was like, I think it was like he was 24, he started dating the 16-year-old. Like he's always liked young, submissive women. And I just find that so fascinating, because that is what his whole, that was the end goal, it seems like, with the cult. Because I'm sure we'll get into it, but there were, in the cult, some of the classes, when they were talking, some of the survivors talked about how like, in their classes, or when they would have their meetings with their leader or whatever, they would talk about like letting their ambitions go, making yourself sexually available. And it's very interesting that like it started off that way. So then it gets me wondering, like, what do you do if you meet someone like that? Do you like go ahead and report them to the police before they do something? But that's not right, because God can change anyone's heart. So I don't know, it's very interesting.
Like how can you predict that the behavior he had in high school would lead to this cult?
True, like, because there's manipulative guys in high school that are now married with like 6 kids and are very good Christian men that love their wives.
How do you know it's just not them being an immature age?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah.
I think a better way to approach it is to just, anyone you meet, have a guard up. It's a stranger, it's someone you don't know. If they're saying some stuff to you that you think is shady, just be like, all right, I think I'm maybe not going to talk to this person anymore. Like, and if enough people do that, they'll snap out of it, hopefully. I mean,
yeah. I mean, that's a good point too, because there were people falling for it. Like he was known to have dating young, submissive women. So it's not like he wasn't, it's not like it didn't work. What he was doing worked. As a matter of fact, what he was doing created a cult around him. But yeah, so that's just some background on Keith. And I just want us all to think about, I don't want to say like think about the men in your life, because I hope you don't have any men like that in your life. But I think that's just something for us to think about. Like Abby said, when you meet people, is this person, do they have good intentions? Are they using language that is very manipulative? Like, are they, because from what
sounds, I mean, not to get too into the weeds. I mean, sorry, I think I'm lagging a little bit. Not to get like too into the weeds, but especially if you're like a young girl and an older guy is showing interest in you, I'm not saying that's immediately like big, huge no, but like definitely ask yourself, like, what are his intentions here? Like, because a lot of times older men who are, quite frankly, losers date younger women because they're easier to manipulate and they don't catch on as quickly as women their own age that they are losers.
Yeah.
So just ask yourself that.
Very good point. I'm just going to add one little thing to that. 24 and 16 is too much of an age difference. I'm sorry, if a guy is 24 interested in you, he is not interested in you for your intelligence. I'm sure you're very intelligent. He is interested in you for something else. 24 and 16, too big of an age difference.
Yeah, that's gross.
It's disgusting. Just ugh. But yeah, that's, I'm trying to think if there's anything else about Keith that I wanted to bring up.
So I actually had something.
Oh, perfect.
Keith had another full-blown pyramid scheme essentially before this.
Yes.
He like had this whole other company, and he got, I said, you're not allowed to like associate with this brand anymore because you scammed so many people. So this isn't like a new thing for him. He knows how to manipulate people, and he knows how to use this sort of pyramid structure to make money and like gain power for himself.
Yes. I also want to add really quick. I feel like you're lagging. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
I think it's Abigail lagging.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I also want to add, like, this also had very much MLM vibes to it, which is another reason why I want to talk about it, because it is, I mean, he started off as a pyramid scheme. He saw how well that worked. MLM, I'm sorry, let me say it the more professional term. It started off as he knows how well an MLM works, and he knows how to get people. So it started off like that. And I think that's another thing. Like, when people, MLMs are, we all know so we know the big ones, like It Works, Herbalife, LuLaRoe. If you saw that, the documentary.
Oh, I sure did.
Yeah.
Maybe so we should do an episode on that.
I agree. Like, we know MLMs, but then there's all of these, like, I know my brother was like approached at one point for like this sales one that like they marketed it as a way, like they through LinkedIn, I think, at one point. And like MLMs have changed. This idea of having the success programs, because and some of the survivors and some of the things that I listened to, they were saying that, like, yeah, they did learn some things. They did improve on their life. There were benefits out of some of the lessons that they learned, some of the conversations that they had at the beginning. It definitely was beneficial. So it is something that we can all accidentally stumble into, because that's the other thing too. I think, just to remind everybody, it can happen to anyone, and some of the people who it does happen to, they stumble into it. It never starts off with being branded. That's never the entry level event.
Right. It's an escalation. Yes. It doesn't just start with it. Like I said, they draw you in, they gain your trust, and then they like use manipulation tactics to strip you of your ability to think critically, so that all of this that's going on around you, and the fact that everyone around you is also buying into this same stuff, makes you think that this is normal.
Yes. Yeah, that's the other thing too, because there's always so many people who are like into it too, and like, yeah, come on, it's tons of fun. And then if you start to think differently, it feels kind of weird. And I mean, I know I've experienced that. Now, sorority isn't like an MLM or a cult, but like, I know that when I was thinking about, like, I don't really like the sorority that much, I remember thinking, well, no, so-and-so's been really not, oh, well, they did that. Like, that's just kind of how our brain calculates things. Vic, do you have any opinions or thoughts that you want to question so far? She's never heard of this, so this is kind of us teaching her.
I'm following just fine.
Okay. Oh, good.
Right.
Okay. All
right. So I can kind of get back to my little timeline here. So the thing was in the early 2000s, the NXIVM Cult started getting allegations, basically, that it was a scam, it was a pyramid scheme, everything. There was a bunch of there were like some articles published saying like, yeah, this is trash, and one significant thing that happened was cult investigator Rick Allen Ross obtained a training manual from a former NXIVM member, and he published excerpts from it in a series of articles on his website. So basically, NXIVM was not happy about that, because these classes and the training manuals and all that stuff were subject to non-disclosure agreements, basically meaning that people who signed up for these classes like weren't allowed to talk about what they learned in the classes or share like training materials or anything with anyone outside of it, because that defeats the purpose of people signing up for the classes if they can like see these training manuals anywhere, which is generally like a good thing for legitimate businesses, because it makes sense, you know, like if they're selling a product but people can get it for free, it defeats the purpose of selling the product. So
I guess that makes sense, because I remember, I think it was the Was I in a Cult podcast where they were talking about to this day nobody really knows what the lessons really were. I would love, hopefully the non-disclosure agreement will be over soon, because I would love to hear like what they learned. I know that one of the girls in another podcast I was listening to, she said that some of the lessons were just literally things taken from other books. So like, you know, The Secret, which is super popular, just a bunch of self-help. She was like, it's just a bunch of things that you learn in other self-help books put together into a program that you're paying like $7,000 for. Yeah, a lot of people said that a lot of what he taught, like in hindsight, now that they're not in the cult cloud anymore, it was super misogynistic and very like anti-woman and kind of just like self-serving almost, like getting these women to think that they need to be, you know, submissive to men and, you know, follow all these like really misogynistic rules and stuff like that in order to better themselves, basically. So
let's talk framed that way. It sounded okay to them, but it's like looking back, a lot of them said like, the stuff that we were being taught was really awful.
And let's talk a little bit about that really quick. For one, there was this one that really stood out to me. I think it was the girl from Was I in a Cult? And so trigger warning, she experienced an assault. And that was something that was like, obviously that's a traumatic event. That's not something that, if you don't get help from that, it's kind of hard to move on your own. So she expressed to her person that like, I've experienced this. And they made the comment, this is so disgusting. They made the comment like, maybe he needed something from you. That's why he did that to you. Something like that.
Yeah.
And like, that is disgusting. But that was like the mindset they were trying to get all of these girls to think of, like, women. So, you know, we recognize men and women are different, but, you know, you're not, a man assaulting you is not him he's assaulting you. That's a terrible, disgusting act. It's not him. He was essentially saying like, oh, he needed to learn something and you were just the vessel that he learned it from. Something like that. And like, it's
dehumanizing to people. It's like, you know, you were a means to his end, and that's not an okay thing to say to someone. Well, another thing too that they said was like a huge kind of like cornerstone of what they were being taught in NXIVM is that there are no victims. So I'm not going to choose to be a victim, which if you really think about that in this context, that's very easy for them to weaponize against people. To say like, you know, if they do take a step back and question anything that's going on, they can really easily spin that and gaslight people and say, oh, are you just acting like a victim right now? Like, oh, things are getting hard and, you know, you're scared and it's getting too real and you're acting like a victim. So I think that's very interesting, because I think like just objectively hearing like, I'm not going to choose to be a victim is a good thing. It sounds like a good thing, but if it's being weaponized in a way that's manipulating you, it can turn bad really fast.
Yeah, exactly. Listening to people's stories, I understand how that can be, feeling like you're not a victim, and you know, victim, not victor, is definitely something that we should say, we should believe. But at the same time, someone hurting you is not them getting something out of you that they need to become a better person, like that. And I think that's where, and that's how I think cults, and that's how people can manipulate, and that's how they get, is they're so close to the truth. Like, I mean, the idea of not being a victim, that is a good idea. Like, you don't want to live your life all day, every day as a victim, but there's a fine line between not living your life as a victim as well as recognizing this thing happened to you. It was not okay. And let's figure out how you can move on and become a productive member of society. And I think that's how these cults, they're just so close to the truth, which is why you have to have a grounded truth. You have to have something that you know to be truth to be able to recognize when something is not close to the truth. And the only way we do that is through the Bible. That's the only way you can know the truth, is reading the Bible.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, aside from all these like shady things that they were teaching that they didn't want people to find out about, they ended up suing this guy, this Rick Allen Ross, and the former NXIVM member who gave him the manual, basically for violating the non-disclosure agreement. It got dismissed, but they appealed, and then it got dismissed again, and they appealed again. And
of course,
basically what the court ended up ruling was that Rick Allen Ross's use of the manual was covered under fair use because he wasn't using it to copy it. He wasn't using it to like make his own self-help courses using the materials from the manual. He was using it to criticize it on his website.
That's how YouTube is. Well,
exactly.
Why did I say YouTube that way? That was so weird. I said it.
It's okay. I do that too.
But yeah, that's how.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, if it's a parody, if it's a criticism, if it's something that's not like, you're not ripping it off, basically. You're not using it to use it for the same purpose, then you're good to go, basically. And that's what the court said.
Good.
So that was just a gigantic waste of everyone's time, essentially. But it kind of started this pattern for NXIVM of basically, if anybody says or publishes anything bad about them, we're just going to sue them. And, you know, they used the Bronfman sisters, the Seagram's liquor heiresses, they used their fortune to fund these lawsuits. So I read somewhere that, I believe it was on Wikipedia, that the Bronfman sisters spent something like $100 million on this company.
Oh my God. I know.
Like,
wow.
Insanity.
That's crazy. I know that their father is like, if he's alive or if he's dead, I know he's like,
he is no longer alive.
Yeah. I'm sure he's rolling in his grave.
Yeah. He was very vocal about his dislike for NXIVM too. He said publicly on many occasions to many outlets that he hopes his daughters can get out of it, because I don't know that he knew the extent of the sexual assaults and all of that stuff going on, but he said my daughters are being financially abused, essentially, and he was totally correct about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
$100,000. And you know what? That just shows how good of a manipulator he is.
Yeah, to get them to just pour all of their money into these frivolous lawsuits against people who are rightfully criticizing his organization. It's sad. I think that it takes a special kind of narcissist to be able to manipulate people like that and just to stand by and defend this thing that so many people are telling you it's bad, it's manipulative, it's abusive, and to be like, no, you just don't understand it. I think really it takes a special kind of narcissist like Keith Raniere.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, pretty bad. So that kind of became their MO then. They just started suing people who said anything bad about them, which I think now would be a good time to discuss the different branches that kind of broke off. Like,
yes. So
go ahead.
Okay. So that is how the podcast I listened to explained, if it wasn't for these branches breaking off, he wouldn't have necessarily been able to go to jail or get in any trouble, because this is where it started to become illegal. Because unfortunately, selling people courses that are just basically essentially repeating other people's courses, but worded it in a way that's like part of fair use, isn't illegal. But what happens next is, so what got very famous is DOS. That is the one that everyone talks about. That's the one that Allison Mack, Chloe from Smallville, that's the one that she was in charge of, essentially. And I want to talk. So the other person who is like in all these documentaries, who actually was on the Skinny Confidential, is India. Now, what I find very interesting about India is anything you listen to and look at, everybody's like, India, India, India. Well, I finally found something where it wasn't all about India. And just a little side note, this girl, you could tell, she actually was one of India's slaves. So you can tell that like she didn't necessarily think India was as bad as Allison, but she definitely did not think India was as innocent as she is portrayed to be.
Absolutely. And I am fascinated by this question, which I definitely want to discuss. So India, for those of you who don't know, she was a part of NXIVM for a long time before she was recruited into this DOS. And DOS is basically this like secretive society within NXIVM that was only for women. And how it worked was whoever like recruited you into DOS was your master and you were their slave. So what they made them do was they made them hand over collateral in the form of nude photos, incriminating statements about family members, videos, anything like that made them look bad, many of which were not true.
I was just about to say, like, if you couldn't think of something, they'd be like, we'll make something up.
Yeah, they had women on there saying like, my father abused me when I was a child, like,
and their father did not,
and it never happened. Basically, They just did it as collateral, so that basically the idea was like, as soon as you like agree to go into this DOS subcategory of NXIVM, like that's it, you're in. And if you decide to go out, then we release the collateral. So I guess, and India agreed to this. She gave the collateral. She was in, she was a slave, and she eventually got to a point where she was the master of other girls that she had recruited into DOS. But Mallory, like you said, a lot of these documentaries are very pro-India. Look at this little
sweet girl. She was
sweet girl who got manipulated into this horrible thing. Like, I guess my question is, where do we draw the line between being manipulated and making your own personal choices to continue this stuff? You know, I guess how do we draw that line?
So I've been thinking about that as well, because India was essential, because I mean, we're saying India was a sweet, innocent girl who was manipulated. We could also kind of say something similarly about Allison Mack, because Allison Mack she didn't start it. We can say that for anyone who was under Keith, pretty much. If you weren't Keith, you can say that you were manipulated. And to me, I think the line is drawn when you start doing things to people. Like, I think like if she had just continued to be the slave, we could like have a little bit more sympathy. She was a victim.
She was just a victim. Yeah.
But the moment she became a master, I think that's when I don't think she's as innocent. Right. And so what I deducted from watching Seduce, because that's the one all about India, is her mom. Okay, so from my understanding, her mom realized it was a cult. Her mom was let in on the secret that Keith was a sexual predator. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but Keith was a sexual predator and that something was going to go down about the cult. So her mom started going on shows and talking to newspapers. She was on Megyn Kelly's show, a super relevant talk show host. That's just an inside joke, but Vic didn't laugh. She's not really okay. Anyway, so she was on Megyn Kelly's show, and she was on all these. She was in the newspaper. She was interviewed, I want to say, by Time, talking about how her daughter was in this cult. Her daughter's a victim. Her daughter's a victim. Her daughter's a victim. And then eventually, her daughter comes out, and I mean, even listening to it, like now she understands she's a victim, but it does sound like when everything went down, she still was kind of not really understanding that like everything that was going on. So honestly, I think what saved India's life, why India is not in jail, is because her mother did that whole social media, that whole press circuit explaining how India was a victim. Even though I mean, that was the vibe I got from the girl who was her slave that was on that podcast. It was called Was I in a Cult? Everyone should listen to it. She was Jane Doe number 2 mentioned in the FBI report. The vibe I got from her was that India is not this sweet, innocent. And I mean, when I think about it, I'm just like, she could not have been. I mean, I'm sure, you know, she definitely was a victim, because there were definitely things like they made her, so part of DOS was, like we said, the nude pictures and the collateral. Well, another part that they had everyone do is seduce Keith, the vanguard, the leader. You had to seduce him and have sex with him. So, I mean, India had, well, she didn't have, well, in the thing, she technically had to do it because they had the collateral and whatnot. So India did that. And then she tried to convince the girl, her slave that was on the podcast, she tried to convince her, knowing her sexual history, which I think is disgusting. I think that is so disgusting. I think that's so terrible. And I think that's why you can tell, like, the girl, because here's the other thing too, India is this, now she's kind of supposedly this innocent, or not innocent, or like this victim, I guess. Like so you kind of can't say too much about her negatively, is kind of the vibe I'm getting from that podcast. So that's why she didn't say too much. But I'm like, no, I don't think India is innocent. I think India has a very good, smart mom. And her grandmother, I don't know if you saw this in any of your thing, her grandmother is like an heir to the throne someplace.
Yeah, she's some kind of royalty. I forget which country it was, but yeah, she comes from a very like powerful, famous, successful family. And again, I love that just speaks to the type of people they were recruiting to be in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in the Seduced, really quick, in the Seduced documentary, the grandmother from the beginning was having none of it. I love, like, everything about the grandmother. I loved her. She was just like, I thought it was stupid. I don't understand why she did it. Then, and she was also kind of, so how India got involved was her mother invited her, because her mother's friend was like, oh, come to this thing. And then her mom like, oh, come with me. And then the grandmother was like, yeah. So I forgot her mom's name, but her mom's apparently a famous actress.
I believe was her name. Catherine.
Yeah, Catherine. Yeah, Catherine Oxenberg. She's like a famous actress. And she was like, yeah, Catherine got India involved. And I thought it was dumb. Something like that. And I was like, oh, I love you, grandma. Like,
love that.
Yeah, I love that. She knew from the jump. But yeah, so Vic, what do you think? When do you think someone stops being a victim?
Because like when y'all were talking about this, like I go back thinking about Epstein and like the woman.
Oh yeah,
who was kind of the, I guess, what is she technically?
A female pimp.
I guess like, her being like the pimp essentially. And then like I think about like all the like the human trafficking episodes that we put out last January. I go back and think of those and how, I don't remember who was talking about this, but how they go back and like these girls will be trafficked, and then in order for them to better their situation, they'll find ways to traffic other girls.
Oh, that's a good point too.
Yeah, so it's
and
like,
also and I also think about like what she was saying too is how like they would like kind of what you guys were saying is like they would hold stuff over their heads is like, well, if you don't do this, then I'm gonna go and hurt your family. I'm gonna go and traffic your sister. And so I think it's a fine line. I mean, I know you can't like it, this is incomparable, but I think about it's like how easy is it to convince people to do stuff? Like look at like what we've been through the last pretty much 2 years of COVID, and how when someone you trust that's in power tells you you need to stay home, you need to wear a mask, and how easy we all abided by it.
Yeah.
So I think it's very hard to determine when someone's a victim, because I feel like you need to understand the whole story. Like I get what you guys are saying, and like think about it too, like because I've dealt with this in athletics, like the girls that were abused by the USA Gymnastics, and how if one of the coaches spoke up, they could be fired. it could hurt their job, it could hurt their reputation, even though they had nothing to do with what Larry Nassar did.
Yeah.
It's very, like I said, it's very hard to determine when someone's a victim and when someone is causing it.
I think too, I'm thinking back to this Dateline episode I watched where they interviewed India and her mom, and India, like, they kept asking her these questions, kind of like, you know, getting at the same thing we're talking about now. Like, when do you cross the line of being a manipulated victim into like participating in harming others? And she really said, like, everything I did because I was so scared because they had that collateral against me. And I'm just kind of like, I understand that, but is that the truth, you know?
Yeah.
Or was she so brainwashed that she thought she was actually like doing good for these other women?
I'm so on the fence. This will be a good question to put on our Spotify, everyone. Spotify now allows you to ask questions, so you should answer this. When do you think you go from being a victim to a perpetrator? And I like hearing what you said, Vic, and like what you just said, Abby. Like, I want to have more compassion, and I do, but at the same time, I'm just like, like, if I was her slave, for example, the Jane Doe 2, I think her name was Jessica, like, if I had gone through something like that and you asked me, it would just be very hard for me to be like, yeah, you know, you're a victim too. Or like, but I mean, that's a very good point about she did have collateral. She did have to do all these things. And she definitely, like, I definitely think she was brainwashed. I think that there's different tiers, and she is presenting herself as on the bottom tier. And I think she's just like a tier up. I think that's where I'm at. Like, there's definitely perpetrator, victim / perpetrator, and then victim. And I feel like she's just like, oh, I'm victim, but you're victim / perpetrator. So I think at some point, I think
she does feel a lot of guilt for what for her part in bringing other women to be her slave into this DOS, but I think she doesn't want to face punishment for it.
Yes. Okay. That's it. I think you're right. Because I definitely, like, there was just, it felt like in the podcast I listened to, It's Getting Confidential and on Seduce, it felt like she was like almost removed from the situation. Like, this girl India did this thing, and I feel she should not have done this. Man, that girl India, as opposed to like, I did this. Instead
of responsibility. I did that.
Yeah.
Exactly. I got that same vibe.
And I totally get where she's coming from in the sense of like, from self-preservation. Like, you know, if I was participating in something like that, I definitely, because I mean, Chloe and Keith and Sarah got some really harsh jail times. I don't remember how long they're in jail, but I mean,
got like a huge sentence, like 120 years, I think. Like,
yeah,
like Allison pled guilty and only got 3, I think. And then one of the Bronfman sisters got 6, if I'm remembering.
Yeah. Correctly. You know, I don't know India personally, but I can say that she would not do well in jail. I mean, I don't know. I know her from those documentaries and and hey, I wouldn't either. I would do everything to be out of it as well.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, she definitely is doing a lot of self-preservation, which I totally understand. Hopefully she will get, I mean, honestly, I think things like this, more than anything, this is when you have to connect to God, because they went through so much. So let's just get back into that. So, DOS. Okay, so the other aspect of DOS, like we said, they had the collateral, and this is kind of where it started to go downhill, was they got branded. Now, the branding, do you have anything specific about the branding symbol? Or do you want
so yeah, I have some stuff on the branding. It was, as people kind of started to speculate more about NXIVM, it was rumored that they were branding women, but for a long time they didn't have any evidence of it. But then in 2017, New York Times did an article where it was basically an expose where they interviewed former NXIVM and DOS member Sarah Edmondson, who is an actress from Canada. And she was like a longtime member of NXIVM, was a one of the first members of DOS, and she was a defector, essentially. She had left the NXIVM, all of it, and she wanted to expose them, basically. So as a part of this article, she allowed them to take photos of her brand to be like, yeah, it's a real thing. I have one.
Yeah.
And basically what the brand was, is it was Keith Raniere's initials. So it was K with a little R next to it. And he denies it, that he denies even knowing that the women were getting branded, which if you watch The Vow, there are voice recordings of him talking about the branding. Like,
yeah.
He is like talking about an upcoming branding ceremony. He definitely knew about it. And I'm sure he on purpose wanted the KR. Like, why else would it be that they brand?
Right. And in a podcast I was listening to, the recording specifically, he had them say, he said something like, make sure before you brand them, they say something like, yes, master, please brand me, or I want this, or something like that. He was like, have them do that so they think that it's something that they want. But let's be honest, no woman wants a random, I guess he's not random, but no woman wants a man's branding on them. And it's not like, you know, when we think of branding, the way she was describing it, it wasn't like I thought of like in the movies when they like brand cows and they have like this hot coal thing that's already out in the shape. No, it was like they had to carve out the initials. So like it was like a line there, a line here, a line there, and they had to be held down. And I want to say one girl got like physically sick. Like it just wasn't.
They would pass out. It was horrifically painful. And the worst part is they were all administered by a woman who was a licensed doctor.
Wow.
And once again, like just a reminder, anyone can fall into this. Now, I want to say, you know, if you have the Holy Spirit in you, hopefully there will be a point where you're like, okay, this isn't, before you get to branding someone, because in my head too, I'm like, should she be responsible for something?
Yeah.
But like before you get to the part of branding someone, hopefully, you know, you're listening to the Holy Spirit and they're like, hey, you know what? This thing is not right. Something's not right about this.
Yeah. But Sarah Edmondson did say, though, in this HBO documentary, she said that she did not know previously that she was going to be branded. They were basically, all she was told was that they were doing some sort of ceremony that night. They got brought to this place. She was blindfolded the entire time. They had to do these like chants and like say these promises. And like basically up until the brand was on her skin, she didn't know that was what was happening. And I assume it's probably like that for all of them, under the guise that they can do whatever they want to them because they agreed to be a part of this DOS.
And the more we're thinking about it and talking about like who's a victim, who's a perpetrator, I'm now like that collateral had to be like, if someone's asking for collateral, that everyone listening from now on, that should be your red flag. Yeah. If someone's asking for collateral, that should be your red flag. From anyone listening, as they said, everyone listening to the sound of my voice, collateral equals red flag. Because I mean, I guess I do understand. Okay, I mean, you have this thing. I told you my deepest, most darkest secret. I told you something that's not true but could ruin my family's life. I guess I will just do this one thing. I mean, what is it? It's just going to be painful for like 20 minutes, you know, like I guess that is how it goes. That's awful.
It's like I almost don't even want to let my mind go there because it's so horrifying.
Yeah. But once again, like these people, and I want to keep like reiterating, these are doctors, these are actresses. These are actors. These are not just like podunk people that didn't go to finish high school, that, you know, aren't educated. These are people who are people we could have gone to college with.
Can I ask, because I think this hasn't been touched on, how did these people get into this cult?
So what ESP classes?
Yeah. So
these like actors and doctors would sign up for these classes, marketing to who?
To just anyone who wants to improve their life. So if you are like, so self-help, it's like a self-help group that we've probably all heard of and seen classes. You would do that, and then they would like single out certain people to join this auxiliary club that's supposed to be this all girls empowerment, like we are girls and we are cheetah sisters. Like, we're in this together. Ha ha
They would
ha.
essentially like move up through ranks too. Like,
yeah.
so they would start as like a student in these ESP classes, and then they would tell them, oh, you're like moving up really fast. If you can get this many people to sign up, we'll move you up and you'll be like a teacher or a coach or whatever. And they had these like banner things they would wear like around their necks to like notify what their like rank within the system was. And the very highly ranking members they invited to join these like super sketchy.
Yeah. They would have to get to know you and see that, like, oh, you're really into it. Because the thing was, from my understanding, there were people who just did the classes and like got something out of the classes and then they kind of just moved on with their life. But it's the people who started going up in the ranks, who started teaching the classes, the people who kind of started getting more involved, the people who, like, one of the girls, she moved from, I want to say, California to live in New York, and Allison Mack's house.
A ton of them relocated.
They like quit their jobs, moved all the way across the country to, those are people who got invited into the cult. And they and some of the things that they did too, that we didn't really touch on, was like they had to record like their eating. So like, okay, for example, this is how it like gets distorted. Like, hey, we're all want to be healthy, so we're all going to be on a diet or something like that. Well, it starts off with that, and then it's like, okay, so now actually today you can only eat 900 calories. You need to take a picture of everything that you eat and send it to me. And then if you don't do that, now you're hurting your sisters. And this one girl was saying how like she started taking like a magnesium multivitamin or something like that, and it was like 300 or maybe like 30 calories, I don't know, it was amount of calories, 100 calories, it was 100 calories. And she asked if she had to like report that to her, count that vitamin as her calories. And India was her person, and India was like, yes, a vitamin, 100 calorie vitamin, she had to count that. And I think at that point she could only have 900 calories.
Wow.
Yeah. It was all under the guise of being disciplined and maintaining control over your choices and what you do and all of that. So so there was that, and there was also the fact that all of these women in DOS were having sex with Keith Raniere.
Yes, and they didn't know. I think you didn't know going in that he had anything to do with it. They thought this was Allison's thing, and she's like, it's a women empowerment. It was
women only.
Yeah.
Is what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
But a big part of it was having sexual relations with Keith, and they were all manipulated into it.
Yeah.
And I just think that is the most horrific thing.
It's disgusting.
It's horrible.
He's
like this guy who is just this like short little dude who like somehow manipulated all of these women into like joining this sex ring, essentially for his pleasure. Like it's horrific. But anyways, so that's kind of what DOS is, and that was kind of the downfall of NXIVM. Because what happened was this Catherine Oxenberg, India's mom, got together with like Sarah Edmondson and a few other defectors from NXIVM, and they started like making calls, getting the FBI involved, like just begging people, like, investigate this guy. This stuff they have going on is horrible. It's shady. They're doing all this stuff. We have all this proof. Like, please, just someone like listen to us, help us. And for a long time, it was really hard for them to get anyone to take them seriously, because these were all like presumably willing adults who were in this, who had joined this program essentially that they wanted to be a part of. And they were all so brainwashed that none of them were willing to be like, no, I need help. I want to get out of this.
And
so
I think
it was the defectors, and it was India's mom who were like, no, they're being harmed.
Yeah. And I think another aspect too, that people probably were like, well, these people are paying thousands of dollars, so they at least, because that's the other thing too, like that, like, I want to say, even if you're like, you were a leader, you were still paying like $20,000 for your classes. Like, you were barely, like, they would pay you, but you were barely breaking even because you're putting the money right back into to get these classes. So I'm sure people were like, yeah, well, they're paying all this money, they have to know it, you know, it can't be that bad if they're doing all this. But yeah, so they were who sounded the alarm, and that is how, without this auxiliary club, or group, Keith would not have been stopped. And they were thinking, I forgot who said it, but someone said it on a podcast or something I heard. They were thinking that his goal was to have women in like politics, women in business, women all over everywhere.
He essentially just wanted to expand it as much as he could,
yes.
which is so disgusting considering that this group was essentially centered around all of them having sex with him.
Yes. And
like, I don't even want to say the words I have in my brain right now to describe it.
It's also it's just thinking about how these women, because also too, there was a Law and Order episode about it, which I watched recently to prepare for this. And essentially, like, if you're thinking about, these women probably went into this wanting to be better, which is once again something that I think we all have like thought about. Like I said earlier, they were feeling empty and they wanted something more. And they wanted to do something that, hey, we're women and women empowerment. You know, I work a hard job. I want to get better. I want to move up the corporate ladder. Or, you know, I don't know, tons of reasons why people did it. And then all of a sudden now they're like having sex with this man that isn't their husband, that isn't their boyfriend. Yeah. This man. Crazy. That like all of a sudden it was all about me trying to be a better person, and now I'm having sexual relations with a guy who, and I mean almost everybody was like, I wasn't even attracted to him. There wasn't anything like about him that, you know, like it's just they're just so in this cult cloud that it seems like it's the right thing to do. Yeah. So eventually they did like get people to listen to them, and the FBI ended up arresting Keith Raniere after he caught wind that he was under investigation and that, you know, things were going to get bad for him. He fled to Mexico, but they went to Mexico and arrested him there in March of 2018. And that was kind of like a lot of people left NXIVM. There are still people who like stood by and remained, you know, faithful to Keith and Doss and all that stuff, but many people left. And that was kind of the end of NXIVM, essentially. I'm pretty sure their Instagrams, or someone that was in a documentary that was still pro them, their Instagram is still active. Like, I think I saw somewhere they like stand outside of his window in the jail and like do flash mobs or something.
They have like meetings and they all dance together. It's like, weird.
It's sad. It's really sad. And I hope everyone listening, you guys have learned some things so you do not fall for something like that. Absolutely. And if you did or you do, like, you know, it happens to all of it. I was going to say it happens to all of us. Maybe not to that extent, but like we
all do things we're not proud of.
Right.
And just, you know, I hope that these women are able to find closure and show themselves grace and, you know, allow themselves to be forgiven because God will forgive them.
Absolutely. And like, you know, I feel like I've been kind of hard on India this episode, but I will say, like, I do feel for her because, I mean, like we said earlier, she had the collateral, and like she really, you can hear, and every time she has talked, she was looking for something more. And there's only one way you can find something more. There is a hole in all of us that can only be filled by God. There is this spot that we all want to be better. We are all chasing after something that only God can fix.
Yeah.
And you can hear it in her voice. You can hear that's what she was looking for, but she just could not find it. And I think we can kind of do our lessons we can move on to the lessons. And really quick, I'll say what my lesson I think is. I think this is just a perfect example of, so I'll use an example. Like, I think that we women were always not always. I think women, especially now in today's age, we want to be our best selves. We want to do things the right way. We have a lot of compassion and we have a lot of empathy for other people, and we're doing our best, and we always want to do better. And I think that a lot of us are searching to make sure that we're doing the right things, and we want to do something more. We want to make sure that we are walking in our calling, because I know that's where I am right now. I want to make sure I'm walking in my calling. I want to make sure that like I'm doing what God has told me to do. So I think that just really does leave us open and very susceptible to joining these things. And I'm not saying for example, like MLMs. I'm not saying all MLMs are a cult. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying they do have cult-like tendencies. I was in It Works, and let me tell you, that thing is cult-like. So like,
yeah, I definitely see that. All of their social media posts look alike. It's like, all right, I wonder what's going on in there, what they're getting fed.
Yes, and we all are looking for something more, and the only thing that can fix that, the only way that we'll be able to feel that hole, that emptiness that we have, is through God and through reading our Bibles. And that's how you realize what is wrong and what is a cult. That's how we can recognize that Allison, tricking these women, having them be branded, that's how we can recognize that that's wrong.
Yeah.
Is from the Bible, that standard. If you don't have that standard, I mean, how can you tell her that what she's doing is wrong?
Absolutely.
So I just think this is just like a reminder that the only way we can fix that hole is through a relationship with God. And then I think this is also a reminder to read our Bibles. We know what's right and wrong from what God's word says. And I know, like, even talking about this, I'm like, okay, before I go to bed, I need to make sure I do my reading for the night. Because, like, I want to be able to, when these things happen, I don't think, once again, like, I think that I could have fallen for, like, College Mallory definitely could have fallen for it, except for the money part. College Mallory did not have $7,000, and her parents definitely weren't going to give it to her. But there could be something just like this, but for broke college students. And right. I want to be able to, if something like this comes up, I want to be able to have the Holy Spirit in me I want to be able to recognize that X, Y, and Z is not right. And the only way you do that is if you know what's in the Bible and if it's in your heart. So that's my lesson.
All right. I think my lesson is, like I said a couple of times before, if something feels weird, it's weird. Trust your gut. And even if you did pay $7,000 for it, it's okay to cut your losses and walk away.
Yeah.
Because it's better than this.
Yes.
Just trust yourself. Like, your intuition is usually right. If something feels wrong, get yourself out of that situation. Quick, easy takeaway.
I mean, if they try to brand you, that's when you got to get out. But
I feel like you should have done that a little bit before. But yes, at Brandon, I think that should have been like, alert.
Try to brand you, you should get out.
Yeah,
I would say my takeaway is, no matter whether you're rich, poor, old, young, male, female, lost, or know where your career is going, like, you can always find your way into a cult. Like, no matter where you are in life, no matter who you are as a person, there's always a chance that you somehow end up in a cult, and you just need to be aware of it. Because you would think all these it seems like with this cult is everyone was not necessarily they were there because of spiritual reasons, but they seem very much top in their fields and very well established professionally, and they felt some missing piece and went searching for it and ended up in a cult. And I guess I can add on to that too. It's that if you are feeling a missing piece, that piece is Jesus. That piece is your relationship with God. And if you feel like something's missing, let us know. We'll be happy to talk to you, guide you to a church, or kind of help you through that process.
Use those critical thinking skills.
Yes.
Yes. And I mean, to wrap it up, I think that also too, just thinking about your friends, if you're listening to this and you're like, you know what, my friend has been in something similar to this, I think, like Catherine, India's mom, I think speaking up and telling the truth is probably the best bet. I don't think abandoning your friend, I mean, obviously, if they won't leave you alone about joining, okay, set up some boundaries. But I think another thing too is just being there and speaking the truth. And I mean, all I can think of is the times I felt very lonely and lost and alone. The only thing that's ever made me feel better is praying and pulling out my Bible. I mean, that I don't know how else to. I wish everybody could I wish I could express it better and like everybody could understand what I mean. Like the only like that's been the only thing that has made me feel better. Occasionally, you know, I could do something that only feels better temporarily. But I mean, pulling out my Bible and praying, it definitely. So yeah, if you guys do feel as if you are lost or want someone to talk to, please feel free to reach out to us. We would love to help you in any aspect. So yeah, make sure that you answer our question. We're going to put it on the Spotify. If you listen on Spotify, they do questions now. When do you think you go from being a victim to a perpetrator? Let us know when you think, and we'll share your answers on our Instagram. Anything else, ladies, you want to add to wrap it up?
No, thanks for listening.
Yep, that's it from my side.
Well, thanks everybody for listening. Make sure you like, review, rate, subscribe, comment, share with your friends. I think this is another really good one that you don't have to be Christian or conservative to at least get something out of. We did talk a lot of Jesus in this, so when you share with your non-Christian friends, make sure they're aware of Jesus, or you know what, don't even tell them. Let's shock them that Jesus is going to come up a lot. But yeah, so share with all your friends, families, random strangers. Yeah, all right, everybody, have a good rest of your day whenever you are watching.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.